Well, debate is essentially testing or practicing what you know about your own meditation.
Yeah.
And you do this with 8 or 9 other folks.
Right.
And you simply, the Lama asks you a question and you have to answer the question in the best possible way. And then you're open to criticism about that, how you manage that particular information.
Right.
And even though it's very many times humiliating and difficult,
Yeah.
it's a marvelous way of getting you to pay attention. It's when someone else is talking, your mind is relaxed and it's easy and big. But when you have to answer a question in front of 10 people, your mind gets just really, really teeny. You have a very difficult time even finding words.
Yeah.
And so that is a marvelous practice on watching your mind go from comfortable, large, and understanding the answers to something very teeny and under a lot of pressure. And this is a way of appreciating that sometimes you have to come up with very precise and very specific answers to their questions. And it's excellent practice. And something actually I rather miss because talking and sharing your experiences with others is a very wholesome thing to do, and I think it's what the Buddha actually did.
I absolutely agree with you, Jim, because in Theravada tradition we have this word, very famous word, we call the Dhamma Sakaccha. It means a kind of Dhamma discussion. It's a timely Dhamma discussion. It's believed that it can be the greatest blessing, but in the later, the Theravada, they don't much appreciate this kind of as you mentioned about discussion or debate, but actually in the Buddha time, which we believe is Tipitaka is our center of the reference. That's why we appreciate the Buddha teaching, a kind of discussion, as you mentioned. Yeah, I think it's quite similar between, as you mentioned about Mahayana or Vajrayana tradition and even the Theravada tradition, the early Buddhism, right? Okay.
Well, certainly the didactic or the dialectic or the Socratic method is questioning what you actually know yourself.
Yeah.
And it turns out that people know all sorts of things about you that you've never imagined. You feel as if many times that you're alone and nobody's paying attention. But when you get into these debates, it turns out that they all know all sorts of things about you, especially when you try to answer very difficult questions.
Right.
And it turns out they're excellent critics insofar as questioning whether you are being honest yourself with yourself.
Right.
And that is extremely difficult thing to do. And you actually can't edit your own dialogue in your mind. One of the comments is, don't believe everything you think. And so editing your own dialogue is really impossible. So you absolutely have to have that Socratic dialogue and feedback from others to evaluate your own participation in the meditational practices.
Yeah, that's even in Theravada tradition we have this kind of evaluation. We call the Vimamsa. In Pali term, Vimamsa, we start with the Shanta, Viriya, and Citta, and Vimamsa. Vimamsa investigation. That's as you mentioned. That's is quite close to each other. So, Jim, next I would like you to tell us about your symbolism. Especially you have experience in Theravada, in Mahayana. Mahayana, or even we call Vajrayana tradition. So I heard that the Vajrayana tradition, they quite appreciate the symbolic representation of whatever the painting, the picture, the material things, to convey the Dhamma, which is the abstract, right, and immaterial. That's why I see the things in front of you. What you want to show us with this I think it's that's maybe this idea from the Vajrayana or Mahayana tradition, right?
Well, how the tradition is actually applied goes something like this. In any temple, you have pictures of the Buddha or the story or whatever. And you'd be walking through the temple with the Lama, and he would notice you looking at a picture.
Right.
And he would say, "Oh," and he says, "Where are you in the picture?" Of course, when you're a new novice, you say, "Well, I must be in the picture." Therefore, you point to some place in the picture. I think I'm there. And he says, "Okay, good. How do you get out of there?" It's not getting in. Getting in is easy.
Yeah.
How do you get out of where you've gotten into?
Okay.
So it's really more of an exit strategy in your problems. For example, getting into college is a lot easier than getting out. Getting into a relationship is a lot easier than dealing with a relationship.
Yeah.
Life is easier to get into than getting out.
Getting out. Difficult.
So the real practice is, how do you get out of your choices? And as we go through the temple, these particular questions get more and more difficult, of course, until you say, when the Lama asks you, "Are you in your picture? Are you in this picture?" You go, "No, I don't. I'm not in the picture."
Okay, please preview your map. Maybe in the second time we can show in details about what is the map that we call maybe spiritual map, right?
Well, it's a journey. It's essentially a map of your journey through your spiritual choices.
Okay.
And
interesting, eh?
Well, it turns out it's very, very old. In fact, this whole idea of mystical journey maybe 10,000 years or longer old. In the early Egyptian period, there's a convincing argument that they had what's called the duat, the circle of the pilgrimage between here and there. And that may be at least 10,500 years old.
Yep.
The Hopis and other Aboriginal people who supposedly went to Australia 50,000 years ago actually took some of these ideas with them.
Yep.
It's easy to decide that these are coincidence. I think it's just as convincing to say that, in fact, this information was available 20,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, and that we walked around a lot on this planet. We just didn't settle down in our village and decide, that this was the end of the planet. We actually walked all over the place.
Yeah.
And we keep thinking that we didn't do that. Right. In fact, we've been doing it our whole history. And as people travel from one place to the other, as the Buddha did, he went from one place to the other talking to people about what they knew. And my problem here with this map is not my relationship with the teachers or even my relationship with the teachings, but it was, how do I explain my experience to inexperienced people? And it turns out that what the Buddha taught was one thing, and then you have tradition.
Yeah, tradition.
And traditions take Buddha's teachings and work it in different ways to help explain to the people they have to talk to.
Right.
It's basically diversity in the Dharma teachings.
Diversity.
And I think that diversity is inherent in the teachings and should be expected. You should have 250 schools of Buddha Dharma, explaining the Dharma in 250 different ways.
Yeah.
Because people approach this whole process in so many different ways.
Right.
So what I did is I chose to simplify. This is the wheel of life here,